Hello and welcome. My name is Josh and I am Skyping here from Hamilton, New Zealand. I'm here interviewing my good friend Chris Kelly, who is a youth pastor at a local church. Chris was born and raised in Southern California, and I've asked him to discuss his unique interactions with New Zealanders during the 2016 presidential election. Chris, as a pastor and as an American living abroad, has a unique perspective on how Kiwis saw the election take place, the things they felt, and the way that they interpreted the events, whether or not they were well informed. So Chris, please tell us how you came to find yourself in New Zealand to begin with.
Yeah, it's not every day a Southern Californian finds themselves almost halfway around the world. I came to New Zealand for Bible school originally. I was here for 12 months as a proper student, and then an additional 6 months as an intern student. Just before my internship started at Bible school, I was offered a position as youth pastor at one of the local churches the Bible school had a fair bit to do with. So I accepted that job, tailored my internship at the Bible school to look after and assist me in training and some of those duties and things, and then carried on after that. But that all started, first arrived in New Zealand, I want to say July 13th, 2013. It might have been sometime somewhere around those dates, a bit fuzzy, but I've been here, what is it now, July 13th, 2018, basically
Who
since.
knew we would videotape on the 5th year anniversary? This is a special day.
Anyway, yeah, so that's how I wound up here.
Great. So it was never your intention to stay this long, but
Not when I originally came.
Yeah.
Now I've married a Kiwi, so you kind of want. I would like to stay for a longer period.
likewise. There we
Yeah,
go.
it's a good decision.
All right. Could you just give a bit of a background as to the political climate of your adolescence, the years of formative childhood experience, moving into teenage years? What were some of the things you first saw? How did your parents teach you to think about politics?
Right.
And can you remember the first major political event in your memory, and then maybe the first person you ever voted for, if you can remember that far?
Sure. First political event I can remember, being an American, 9/11, 2001 immediately comes to mind. I was in 6th grade. I remember that morning very, very clearly. Being in 6th grade, what was it? Just coming up on 11 years old, it would have been that year. No, coming up on 12 years old. My mindset and awareness of politics was shaped by the W era, George W. Bush. So the Iraq, Afghanistan, the war on terror, and all of that, conservative politics really dominating the scope, the spectrum of conversation throughout the entirety of growing up. I was raised by conservative, Christian, evangelical parents. My mom's family, while not sharing our religious beliefs, incredibly conservative. My dad's family, Catholic, very, very, very conservative. In some branches and liberal in others. Most of my childhood and my raising was conservative. The Bush presidency specifically brought a lot of that out. Spent my teenage years in San Diego, which is a massive military town. So conservative politics really kind of defined my upbringing. It was how my parents aligned themselves. It's how they raised my sister and I to be aligned, was able to have conversations with others. Definitely on the conservative side of things.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And just again to the end, I'm not going to ask you to reveal your ballot card unless you really feel the need to, but what was the first election you voted in?
2008 was the beginning of my let me see if I can get my numbers right. I graduated in the year 2008, so I would have I would have been eligible to vote that year. 2008 presidential election would have been Obama and McCain, if I do remember correctly. Yes. I remember senior year of high school, civics class, our professor, our instructor, Ryan Kerman, I'll never forget, wandered around, and on the 18th birthday of every young man that year, he put a draft piece of paper, we register for the draft on your desk. It was his birthday present for you. So we were all very keenly aware. But yeah, no, 2008, McCain, Obama. Right. I remember that one. That would have been the first year eligible.
Okay, great. Okay, changing gears a bit, moving from personal background into your current context.
Yeah.
What is the typical Kiwi, just as a way of introduction, not only is there a Kiwi fruit, but New Zealanders identify themselves nationally as Kiwis.
Yes.
So just as a word of clarification.
Yeah.
What is the typical Kiwi perception of Americans?
Loud, brash to go with the loud, sort of ignorant, seemingly oblivious to the rest of the world. So self-absorbed, very loud. However, most Kiwis are quick to tell me that whenever they visited the States, they always felt very welcomed and very encouraged, that Americans were never afraid to bring them in and to encourage them and to be honest with them, but they are, especially when they come to New Zealand to visit, they're unnecessarily loud and they probably don't have an idea of what they really ought to be up to, rules of the road, politics, all the other kind of things all wrapped in.
Sure. Oh, very good. When you introduce yourself, people can right away hear the accent, and people can also really notice some mannerisms that might give your nationality away. What is the typical question or statement you would hear when you say, "My name's Chris and I'm from Southern California"? Like, what do people say back to that?
Interesting. When I first began introducing myself, it was "I'm Chris from Southern California." Now it's "I'm Chris," and I let them try to guess where the accent is from.
Yeah.
More often than not, they guess Canada, which is a high compliment for me. Similar relations here with New Zealand and Australia as to America and the States, and
Little brother syndrome. Or
very, very much little brother syndrome. So I've enjoyed that. It's always very good. The first thing many Kiwis are saying to me now, after having been here for 5 years, and my wife is one, she doesn't hear my accent at all anymore. Others hear more of a Kiwi accent as I'm talking. So for some, it surprises them that I'm American. They would think that I would be louder, more brash than what I think I am when I'm, in my element here. Probably quite a bit more of that.
Okay. Now, Chris, you've lived in New Zealand you had lived roughly 3 years in New Zealand prior to the 2016 election.
Right.
Now, in that election cycle, don't need to go into the details, we can all remember how much of a lightning rod this election was for worldwide news.
Yeah.
Now, if any differences you can think of, what were some of those differences in the way that people treated you and the way that people asked questions about the United States and the election compared to previously, when the Obama administration was still in effect? What were some of the differences that you noticed as Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump began to march towards November?
Yeah. Working in a church, we have our fair share of people who are a part of the church as well as community members who come and visit. We have an open door policy. They're welcome to drop in and have a cup of tea with us, to share lunch with us, or whatever it is. And the first question I was always asked was, is America serious about this Trump character? Is America losing its mind? Can you justify this for me, Chris? Why are your people doing this? Why Trump? Is there nobody better? The media portrayal down here mostly ignored the Republican Party. When they did pay attention to the Republican Party, it was almost exclusively Trump. It was his shenanigans and chicanery and all the general tomfoolery that seems to be going around what the worldwide news had to say about Trump. When Hillary was spoken of, it was always effusive praise. It was always, she's wonderful, she's amazing. So the questions that I found myself facing were, why this Trump character? Hillary looks like a politician. The other characters, whatever very minimal news time they get, they look like they're politicians. They look like they know what they're doing, and this is their world. Trump is out of his depth. What on earth is your nation thinking? Is this a joke? Are they serious? Is this something that's actually going to happen?
Right, yeah. Very interesting. What ways, if any, did Kiwis demonstrate their ignorance concerning the election and specifically of American politics in general? Does the average Kiwi person understand, let's just say for sake of this conversation, the federal government structure? Do they understand what's going on?
Right. No.
Okay.
Largely, New Zealanders don't understand that America is a constitutional republic set up with a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. as the founders intended, all three of those branches are worked with checks and balances. They're designed to counteract and counterbalance themselves. The media portrayal of Trump was one of an ignoramus, a buffoon. He had no idea what he was doing. It was purely circus. It was purely political. So that the understanding of a Kiwi, looking at their system with their legislative, their judicial, and their executive branch with their prime minister, brought their own understandings to that, and seeing the way that the Prime Minister of New Zealand works and operates, comparing that to what they understand about the President of the United States and this whole leader of the free world title that connects in with that, to look at a character like Trump particularly and to see the outlandish, very American persona that was Trump was concerning and worrying. However, being American and growing up and understanding, I recognized that there was more than just the presidency at play in this particular election.
Very good. Moving on from that, what aspect of American political life seems most difficult for Kiwis to grasp? Let's just limit it maybe to the three branches.
Sure.
The executive, legislative, and judicial. Is there one particular branch that seems a foreign concept, or is it a general thing altogether?
Right. New Zealand works on a multiple party system. So in addition to the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, Labour and National respectively, there's a Green Party. The States has a Green Party, I know, but it never seems to play much of a factor in the elections. In New Zealand, however, the Greens have some power. There's another particular party here, NZ First. With this past New Zealand election, the NZ First Party actually managed to decide the outcome of the entire election, even though they were a significantly minority party. There's a Māori Indigenous Party as well. There's a couple of other smaller ones that never seem to play, but there's 4 or 5 main parties that all have to split the entirety of the vote. So the American system, and being more strictly a two-party system with the conservative, the Republican Party, and the Liberal Democrat Party, seems to be an idea that doesn't really mesh. It's why does it have to be those two? Is there nobody else who's qualified? Is there nobody else who can do the job? So seeing Trump rise up into and take the reins of the Conservative Party baffled them entirely. Here, of course, if there was a character who rose to power and took their particular party, they'd be laughed off as a joke because there would be a plethora of other options. But to see this particular man rise to this particular place, it was baffling.
Yeah, and to date in the New Zealand parliamentary system, no one party has been able to rule on their own. They've had to form some kind of coalition,
right?
And that too balances things out in a different way.
Yeah.
Briefly analyze the New Zealand media portrayal of Mrs. Clinton. How was she portrayed by the news anchors, by the tabloids, etc.? Move through those.
Did I say effusive praise already?
You did.
Effusive praise. It seemed low-hanging fruit, in all honesty, looking at the media snippets of Trump, and not just Trump, but his followers, looking at the rallies and looking at all of these things. It was easy to paint conservatives as trailer trash, as ignoramuses, as backwoods, backwater, unintelligent buffoons. On the flip side, Hillary was always portrayed with the choicest of sound bites. Her followers were urbane, very cultured, very civilized, were always well-spoken, had multiple teeth in their mouth for the sake of comparison. Hillary was lavished praise upon down here, and I found myself repeatedly answering questions. Chris, why wouldn't you vote for Hillary? She looks like she's got it together. She looks like she knows what she's doing. Why? Surely you must be considering this.
And conversely, analyze for me the media's portrayal of Mr. Trump. I know you have already in that answer, but yeah, go into it a little bit more.
He was portrayed very, very pointedly as, at best, cunning, and only in it for the reviews. He was here to get eyeballs. He was here to up his brand.
His latest television show.
Absolutely, he was getting ready to launch a variant of The Apprentice, and he needed the viewership to boost. So he was, and he's got money to spare, so he might as well go ahead and do this thing. The portrayal of Trump, they always found the moments where he was insulting a protester or a rioter, when someone interrupted a rally and they got the crowd shouting this individual down, or where they portrayed some of the bombastic things that Trump has said or has done, some of the things he's mentioned from his past. Without ever getting too graphic, they brought back some old tapes, some really damning evidence and things like that. They looked at the populace that was likely to back Trump, full of the red "Make America Great Again" caps, and they tried to find the individual who looked the least presentable, to say it politely and nicely. And this was the TV that Trump and his followers were getting.
Right. Oh, very interesting. I mean, in your conversation with Kiwis, what would be the policies that were most often discussed in the race of the 2016 election?
Specifically in my interaction, working for a church and finding most of my interactions dealing within that sphere and the bubble of the evangelical world in New Zealand. Abortion was a big issue. Everybody seems to know that Hillary was for abortion and that largely the conservatives were very much against it. So the church here in New Zealand, recognizing that every life is absolutely sacred and it should be preserved, made in the image of God, sought to protect and preserve that, but found strange bedfellows in Trump as the face of the conservative party at this point. So the policies really were largely very, very moral, with the one exception of the build the wall and make Mexico pay for it. New Zealand finds no end of enjoyment in Trump's statement of I'm going to build a wall. Immigration is a huge issue here. New Zealand, I know, is working on very slowly, not adopting, that's the wrong word, but bringing in refugees from the Middle East and the various crises that are going on there and others as well. I know we bring in all sorts.
Us included.
Yes. Yeah. Just lumping myself in there. But to see America, which is for so long served as this beacon, this city on a hill, this hope of the American dream, the 1950s, 2.5 kids, a dog, a cat, picket fence, 2-car garage, all of that other stuff. All of a sudden, Trump is adamant on building this wall. It seems entirely ungenerous and seems entirely unchristian. So to answer some of those questions, as well as on how on earth could he close America to the rest of the world?
Interesting. What was it about this election that, in your mind, captured the minds of New Zealanders? Do you think that the availability of information and the social media presence of both major candidates was the leading factor, or was it more to do with the personalities that were in this election? Maybe another way phrased, if you took two different candidates, we still have the technology of the social media, and is this election as big of a deal here? What was the deciding factor as to why New Zealanders were election crazy?
Right. I think it's both. I think it's both the personalities involved. I think it's also the technology that we have access to. We have the ability via Twitter to throw 140 character thought bubbles out there into the world and then to immediately interact with everybody else's thought bubbles. We have Facebook and the ability to connect with friends and to share videos and media and Snapchat, and I can send quick little videos to my friends. As a youth pastor, most of my youth are actually no longer really on Facebook, but instead on Snapchat, and interfacing and interacting that way. And the access that we have to just pure data and information is incredible. To couple that with what might very well have been the first female president of the United States and Donald Trump, you've got huge personalities involved, both of whom incredibly shrewd, incredibly cunning in their understanding of social media and how it can build and bolster their platforms. So to see them changing the nature of an election cycle, to see the news play its role in that, of course it trickles down across the world that's involved in this. It made its way to the shores here. You probably see the same evidence in Obama. I would imagine you would see a lot of evidence in the Obama administrations in the era there, kind of the social media began to be the juggernaut that it is.
Not so much in 2008, but in the re-election.
Right, in the 2000, was it 14? 12, that's the one, 2012, get my maths right.
Just add 4.
That's the one. But to see social media at the place and time it was, and then not only that, but to have these two very strong, almost ideologues in who they are and the politics they represent, and the way that it seemed the American media was good versus evil, conservative versus liberal. It was all of these gargantuan battles, and of course that spilled over into social media, and of course it made its way here.
Right. In what ways, if any, did New Zealanders think that the outcome of this election would affect their lives?
Right.
What, in other words, was this just the latest, greatest TV show, reality TV show in the truest sense, or were they genuinely concerned, hey, if Hillary gets in, this is going to change, or if Trump gets in, this is going to change?
There wasn't much concern that I ever heard about in regards specifically to Hillary and her policies and what she was or wasn't going to do. The Clintons have a legacy of being friendly on the world stage.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Bill is beloved here.
Bill is very much so.
Yes.
Trump, however, one of his main platforms, again, in the Making America Great Again, was increasing American jobs. To increase American jobs, he was going to the best of his ability as president, would encourage strongly the legislative branch to make laws that helped American business. Part of that being, however, striking down or at the point in time putting a full stop to and a halt on conversations for the TPP or the Trans-Pacific Pact, I think it was, Pacific Nations trading agreement. Trump put the full brakes on that, said I need to look over the paperwork to see what we would want to do. Now, he did that as a president, but in his election, in his campaign leading up to that, he very much was like, I want to review these things, I want to be aware of these things. New Zealanders saw Trump, who he was and what he was saying, as a businessman first, desiring to increase America's business, and saw potential damages to their own economy. New Zealand, massive dairy exports, not just sheep, wool, and meat and things, but dairy now particularly. Huge suppliers to Europe, to China as well. So for what seems like a very good thing, and this Pacific Trade Pact amongst the nations being put entirely on hold, seems to be an incredibly damaging thing to the New Zealand economy. So there was some hesitation with Trump in seeing, okay, how is this going to shake out?
Yeah, especially following the Second World War and the difficulties of the English economy. New Zealand and Australia have begun to look to their geographical neighbors rather than to Mother England, and so that has been a very pressing issue, definitely.
Very much so.
As a Christian, describe some of the ways in which your worldview, our worldview, influenced the discussions of the election. So you look at, you can always find an American correspondent discussing these things on the news. What would be the difference, maybe primary or secondary, to how the biblical worldview influenced how you thought about this election cycle?
Right. The questions I'm more often than not faced had to do with how on earth is America losing its mind with this Trump character, and why can't you just vote for Hillary? The challenge placed upon me by that statement was then to take a step back and to demonstrate to the Kiwis who asked me how, as a Christian, I recognize Scripture as the foundation for everything that we are. It's God's revelation of who He is, who we are, and everything that we need to know in regards to that relationship. Part of that being there is a morality anchored to the nature and the character of God that is true for all people of all times. To look at the policies, the nature and the character of both Trump and Hillary, and then to weigh that and to break that down. To look at Trump's marital indiscretions and the things that he's been involved with in the past, and then to weigh that, to value that, to look at the professions he made over the course of the campaign and the election, and surrounding himself with Christian advisors, and his effort and his attempt to demonstrate that maybe he wasn't who he had been in his younger life. To look at Hillary and to look at the policies and the procedures that she supported, that she backed, to look at her involvement with Planned Parenthood and with Cecil Richards, and to recognize as an American in a place that doesn't understand why that's an issue, to explain what Planned Parenthood does, to explain why abortion is the issue that we see it as, to see Hillary's backing of abortion, to see the absolute moral evil that is involved with sacrificing children for our convenience. and then to push back against that. So for me, the conversations always came back to, okay, I'm a Christian. What does this mean? Okay, people get second chances. Do I want to give Trump a second chance? Is there evidence of repentance, of change, of fruit in his life? Can we do this? Is this safe? Are there better options than Trump we can vote for? And then on the flip side, okay, Hillary is far and away the obvious one. We know who she is. We know what she stands for. And as Christians, we have no choice but to repudiate the vast majority of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anybody would claim going into the election that there was an easy option.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you highlighted it earlier. As we reflect upon the New Zealanders' ability to choose a very niche party, there's a very evangelical-friendly, Christianized party that will represent the vast majority of the things that we believe. For them to have that ability, that party to vote for, they struggled often to grasp what was at stake in a two-party system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What questions required you to think deepest about your opinions concerning the election and its candidates? What, if any, questions did you have to think through that perhaps you didn't have to think through in other election cycles?
Right. The two questions were this: the moral fiber of Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton was far more a known commodity in who she was and what she stood for. Donald Trump, huge wild card. Who is he actually? Is he saying all the right things to put himself in a place, in a position where he can do what it is that he wants to do? Is he just going to say things to tickle ears and to please hearts and kiss babies and make it all well and good and then be whoever he wants to be once he's got the power in the office? Or is this an actual change? So one of the things that I personally had to stop and think very seriously about was, do I trust Trump? Am I willing to put my vote behind a man whose character I doubt, whose political party leanings and voting nature seems to be liberal up until a very recent point in time? Can I trust this man? The other aspect is looking the rallying cry of the evangelicals in America at that point in time was look to the Supreme Court. The justices are aging. At that point in time, Antonin Scalia, I believe, had passed. There was an opportunity to put a justice on the court to break potential ties in a conservative way. Looking at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, looking at Anthony Kennedy, were two particular options as justices who probably won't be on the court for very much longer, and whichever president gets elected, it seems precedent shows they tend to win re-election. So for the next 8 years, there may very well have been an opportunity to put at least one, maybe very well 3 justices on the court. We know who Hillary's going to put on the court. She's going to put liberal justices who are going to push the envelope. Can we bite the bullet? Can we maybe work up some trust to trust Donald Trump when he says that he's got the short list of individuals he's looking at who are conservative and are anti-abortion and are looking at being very strict constructionists and reading the Constitution as it is without trying to do away with it, but honoring and valuing that document as the fabric of the foundation of the states? Can I trust Trump? Do I trust him enough with potentially 3 justice spots? It's hard math.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting thing as we reflect upon the purpose of the Supreme Court to think that we're basing our presidential vote on successive constitutional decisions. Very interesting. Describe for me again, as a youth pastor, as someone who's working with those in New Zealand who would be very aware of the Donald Trump that they see on Twitter.
Yes.
Describe the night that you had last year, the year before,
yes,
where you sat everybody down and said, "Ask me anything you want."
Yes.
What was that like?
So election night, Tuesday in the States. New Zealand is, I want to say, 19 hours ahead of, I think, the Central Time Zone. Somewhere in there. So election day on the Tuesday happens for us on Monday. By Monday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, we had all of the information in and we knew that Trump had won. Youth group for us is on a Thursday night. So I had a couple of nights to prepare, but Thursday night I sat down with my youth group and I said, you can ask me whatever it is that you want about the US election, and I will do everything within my power to answer as honestly as I can. I'll tell you who I voted for, I'll tell you how my thinking process went, and to their credit, this bunch of New Zealand teenagers asked very perceptive questions. Why did Trump win? When it looks like on social media, when it looks like in the media, he looks like an idiot. He looks like a buffoon. He looks like he puts his foot in his mouth more often than not. How on earth could this man win? And then being able to step back and to sit down with them and say, okay, guys, remember, there's more at stake than just the presidency. There's a larger government at play. We have to look at this as an American from those two other branches in addition to the presidency and the executive branch. I have to look at the legislature. I have to look at the judicial. Trump got elected because evangelicals trust him enough to put their faith in his hands when he says that he's going to put conservative justices on the Supreme Court. It's not that evangelicals look at Trump and they saw his past moral failings and glossed over that. It's not that they looked at Trump and saw this visionary ideologue who was going to lead them into, the second chunk of a great, change, a great awakening, pick whatever words you wanted, that he was going to fulfill his promise and make America great again. I think most evangelicals did the math, bit the bullet, and put the man in office who said that he would do these things because it was the lesser of two evils. Because looking at Hillary and who Hillary was, the things that she supported, the things that she backed, her involvement with Planned Parenthood, and her increasingly and incredibly liberal politics, evangelical America could not stomach that. So Trump was the better option. Then I got the opportunity to sit down and talk with him as they asked question after question about, well, why is Hillary as evil as you seem to claim she is? She looks like
my grandma.
Yeah, she looks awesome. She looks like she's got it sorted. She's got a plan. She's for young people. She's got this thing going. Why couldn't she win? And it would be great if America had a woman president, the first one ever. That'd be a fantastic thing. So having to bring a Christian worldview to bear, having an opportunity to explain the political system at a very high level to youth who have no concept. Their system of governments work very differently. Being able to clarify was incredibly insightful. Hopefully for them, I know it was for me. It forced me to think through it.
Yeah, and just even the discussions are a bit hampered by the fact that nearly the entire political spectrum in New Zealand exists to the left of the Republican Party.
Yes.
I don't think there would be a single party that would be at least fiscally more conservative than traditional 20th century Republican party. Morally, there would be some conservative parties, but fiscally, this country is steeped in a kind of semi-socialistic government, and so that's tough to get across. As you reflect from afar on the first year and a bit of the Trump administration, what is your greatest encouragement, and what is your hesitation that still lingers?
The greatest encouragement I've had, I had a long conversation with my parents on the night of the election. My parents, both ardent Trump supporters, conservative, evangelical Christian, recognizing that if Trump was bona fide and he was going to follow through in his word, that this was a very good thing to do, and me hesitant to bestow that honor and bestow that trust. I've been thankful that specifically in regards to the promises surrounding the judiciary, so the Supreme Court, that Trump has nominated both Gorsuch and then now, I think it was this past week, Kavanaugh, as well, has put two conservative constructionists.
Relatively young.
Relatively young on the judiciary. I know there's other things, other promises he's failed, and in other ways that he is less than exemplary. I believe at points in time he's a buffoon. I don't think he's an idiot by any stretch of the imagination. He's incredibly intelligent. So I've been thankful that the trust the evangelical community placed in Trump has been rewarded in that regard. let down in other ways, but for me, I think they're more minor. I think that was the defining issue of the 2016 presidential election, was the opportunity to put conservative justices on the Supreme Court. And sitting here in New Zealand, I had the opportunity to explain the American, the civil structure, how we go about, electing representatives to local legislature, local governance, both at county and the state level, to explain how DC works, legislative, House, Senate, to explain the Supreme Court, to explain the presidency, to work through all of these issues, and to explain how a man like Trump was a viable option
Right.
to a culture and a society that was baffled front to back on how on earth this fake spray tan Oompa Loompa could have made it so far.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just on the last question, as a Christian, as we reflect upon the 2016 election, what are some lasting lessons that we need to remember the next time we are faced with a difficult, maybe seemingly impossible decision between two candidates? What's a lesson that this election should have taught us?
Lesser of two evils? No. I hesitate to say I pick Trump again. I know there were innumerable blog pieces and think pieces written about how we're not electing a pastor, we're electing a president, but I do believe moral fiber and moral character matters. Looking at Trump and Hillary from a conservative standpoint, recognizing the platform that Hillary stood upon as absolutely and astonishingly terrifying, with the worldview that I have, and seeing how everything she stands for is very nearly antithetical and opposite and counter to everything that I believe. The evangelical community I feel like they were backed into a bit of a corner, and I'm thankful that Trump has followed through. I'm thankful for the individuals who surrounded Trump and lended their voices. I think that was key. I know in regards to the evangelical community, having Christian advisors who were there and who testified to the nature of Trump's sincerity, how he did, no, he's the real deal, he's the genuine article. I think that was the only thing that swung one way or the other. If we find ourselves in a similar position in some point in the future, we have to look to the evidence. We have to look to those who are closest to them and what they have to say about that individual. Who are they behind the closed doors?
And just recognize that as Christians, we have the ability to say, this man's actions are wrong. And yet we can look at the ideas and say, okay, how can we still understand the situation? There's no reason we have to excuse it and cover it up.
No reason to excuse it.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Just to recap, Chris is a youth pastor at Te Awamutu Bible Chapel and has been here for just about 5 years, serving the Lord here, and was placed in a bit of a unique situation in the 2016 election to provide a bit of a crash course on American politics to his youth and to the church at large. So thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Call me the American apologist.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you, sir. And these 38 minutes, so that's a bit longer than I need it to be, but that's perfect.
More than enough. You just chop and choose answers.
I'll keep it. Easy. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for video editing.
It's got to go in at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Could use some more water. You're all good.
I could use some. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do that. I hope that works well enough.
Thank you, sir. That was great. Yeah.
You're welcome.
It was fun.
It was fun. Disney did that with me a couple of times, and then they stopped interviewing me. I don't know why.
Interview about your politics.
No. Like they, I found myself in a really cool position at the store I was at, and the regional manager knew who I was, and I found myself with, doing a Make-A-Wish kid and working at the biannual D23 Expo conference, and a couple of those instances, I think there was the Make-A-Wish kid. I got the chance to escort a Make-A-Wish family around a Disney store and be their personal shopping assistant for a morning. That was fun. But the camera crew was there, so we were given talking points and stick to the talking points. I didn't stick to the talking points. And the camera crew thought I was a hoot and a holler and recommended me particularly to the regional manager. It was probably the first time they found out about me.
That's neat.
And then they somebody else grabbed me at the D23 Expo at the little Disney store we were working in and dragged me over to the camera crew, and the regional manager was like, "Oh no, we've talked to Chris already. We got him with the Make-A-Wish kid. Go get somebody else." And the camera guy was like, "No, I want to talk to this kid again. He's a cool kid." I was like, "Oh, great. What am I talking about? What do you want to know? It's Disney." Nice.
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 The live interstitial in your nut. Don't know where my phone is.